Yo, what's going on? Pop Nico back with another video, and today, Saul Alvarez, he did it. Another legendary moment on Saturday. Knocked out Billy Joe. Knocked out his eye, I think, or he fractured his eye. Knocked the dude's face off. Took his belt. Billy Joe was undefeated. Took his undefeated record. So just legendary moments, legendary stats piling up for Canelo. And even being a new fan to boxing, I can tell Canelo is the best. I mean, just power, endurance, physique, everything just crazy, off the charts. I don't see anybody beating him anytime soon. And he's in his prime. I don't see anybody beating him. I tried to react to the actual fight highlights, but that's blocked worldwide. So we're just going to actually watch a doctor's explanation to Billy Joe's eye injury. I don't know if his eye got knocked out, but it's definitely some type of fracture. He broke his face. So Canelo's out here punching dudes so hard. Their face is literally breaking. And he's taking your undefeated record, and he's taking your belt while he's at it. Just ruthless. Canelo's the GOAT. I cannot deny it. Canelo is looking like the GOAT. Crazy. All right, we're going to get right into this. Let's go. Update Billy Joe's eye injury. Dang, Billy. Dang, Billy. Tough.
Billy Joe Saunders is undergoing surgery after the full extent of his injuries were revealed to be something called a quadrupod fracture.
Quadrupod?
Dr. Brian Suter, and this is your #1 source for learning about the unique medical side of sports. I'll link the first video I did after the fight last night that just kind of walks through the differential and some of the other aspects of the anatomy kind of there in the moment. But now that we have the actual diagnosis of what was injured, I want to explain to you guys what exactly that is. First off, I missed something last night when reviewing the footage that really in hindsight does give a clear picture of what happened. Here on the left side of his face, you can clearly see this contour of that cheek.
My boy can't even open his eyes.
Over here. But on the right side, it's completely sunken. It's completely collapsed from that fracture. And so honestly, yeah, in hindsight, this was very clear evidence for just how bad this was right there after the fight. So now the official word from Eddie Hearn is that he suffered something called a quadrupod fracture with multiple fractures to his orbital bone, a complete blowout. So let's refer back to our bio.
Canelo completely took it out.
A sense of course, what we're talking about with the orbital socket. I've shown the eye here on the right side. This area is that area where we can see the clear prominence on Saunders' left side of his cheek, but where it's completely sunken in over on the right.
Dang,
let's get the eyeball out of here.
Crushed
that
it.
just looks a little bit creepy even to me. So the key bone that we have to point out here is the zygomatic bone. I'm going to highlight
zygomatic. I'm over here learning new words.
These quadrupod fractures, as it's called, will actually go by other names. You might see tetrapod, tripod fracture. You might see zygomatico-maxillary complex fracture. And so sometimes these words get a little bit interchanged depending on the specifics and kind of where you're seeing it. Quad, of course, means 4. And so there's essentially 4 components to this quadrupod fracture.
Okay.
It's important to understand there's not one orbital bone. So when we hear somebody has an orbital bone fracture, there's actually multiple bones that make up the orbit. It's not a single orbital bone.
I'm with you.
If I highlight a bunch of these over on the other eye, what I want you to see is how technically all of these different colored bones could be considered part of the orbital socket.
Okay.
So all those different color bones that come together.
So it's not just one bone, it's multiple bones.
Different orbital bones.
Got
so
it.
Looking back over to the right-sided zygomatic bone, what I want you to focus on are the contact points where it meets up with the other bones of the face. Here we have its connection with the temporal bone, and we call these areas where the two bones of the skull sort of meet with one another suture lines. These are areas that as we're developing as babies, there's initially some space there, and they're soft.
My boy crushed all that.
Then as we age, eventually those fuse
Canelo
together
said, yeah,
and leave these
I'm going to take that from you.
Classically, we have them across the top of the skull, and so you might see a doctor sort of feeling those lines in a baby to make sure that these suture lines ultimately get closed. Now, the first component of this quadrupod is going to be fractured to this zygomatic arch. So here through the connection with the temporal bone, and then up in the front with the connection to the maxilla. Then, because of course that zygomatic bone articulates with some more of the orbit, the next component is going to be fracture of this lateral or outer wall of the orbital socket.
Dang.
That involves the connection between the zygomatic bone and the sphenoid bone deeper inside the eye, and then up top, the zygomatic bone and the frontal bone. So you can see how we're basically cutting through these different areas to gradually detach the zygomatic bone more farther from the face.
Oh my gosh.
The next component is this is going to involve the orbital floor, which is going to be that lower portion of the orbital socket, which can give you this orbital blowout that we hear. Essentially, the
Orbital
contents
blowout?
of the orbit with the muscles, there's fatty tissue in there, the eyeball, the nerves, can come down through that orbital floor into the sinuses back behind the skull, which then gives the last component involving fracture of this maxillary sinus that's kind of deep back up in here. So what you end up with
What is this guy
brain
saying? I
that's
cannot understand
highlighted
any of this.
essentially becomes detached from the rest of the skull, and in the case of Saunders, can be depressed, involving all kinds of other areas here.
My boy put his face in
This is a
depression.
trauma. We heard that Saunders
Oh,
couldn't see. And if we look back, his eye was pretty clear. And so that does make me concerned about possible injury to the structures of the eye.
he broke his
Imagine
eye.
if he would have gone back out there and taken another punch from
It would have
Canelo,
been,
knowing that
he
this
would have
bone was
never
already
woke
basically
up.
detached from the rest of the skull. As bad as this is, it would have been even worse. They're already talking about his career potentially being threatened, and yeah, if you have bad enough damage to your
His
vision,
career could be
if you have bad enough
over?
injury here, this is something that could end a boxer's career.
Dang!
So the key takeaways to summarize this video: a quadrupod fracture involves a fracture to this zygomatico-maxillary complex over here,
What?
where essentially you have 4 different components of the fracture, where this zygomatic bone becomes essentially detached or disassociated from the rest of the skull. Because of its proximity to the orbit, you can have an orbital floor fracture and an orbital blowout, causing potential trauma to the actual tissues of the eye, which is what really makes this very severe. That's it for the video, everybody. I hope it was
That's the end of the video. Dang! The xylophone, all type of bones was broken in that dude's face. Are you kidding me? Dang. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Canelo is a different breed. The GOAT. He's got to be the GOAT. What? His next opponent is gonna be Caleb Plant. I heard him call out. Who is that? I've never heard. Who is Caleb Plant? Do we got to react to him? I've never heard of that dude. That's gonna be easy work for Canelo. He's gonna go undefeated the rest of his career. He's out here breaking dudes' face, xylophone bone, zigophone bones, bones that you shouldn't even know he's breaking. That's crazy. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. I'll be back with another video very, very soon. Canelo, man, chill!